Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Opinions from the Armchair. I'm Ashley Miller. Yes, I know it's a bathrobe, but I don't have a smoking jacket. The topic du jour? And by Titanic, I mean the ship, not one of the movies. If you are watching this from your undiscovered village deep in the Amazon or from another planet, let me fill you in. The RMS Titanic was a passenger ship, built in 1912. Not a cruise ship, this is when people use ships to go somewhere. Up till then, it was the single largest ship, indeed the largest moving object humanity had ever built, capable of carrying more than 2,000 people, along with tons of cargo and royal mail, at a top speed of 24 knots or 28 miles per hour. Built with a revolutionary new hull design, the press claimed she simply could not sink. Until her maiden voyage, when she did. Of the 2,200 crew and passengers, over 1,500 either drowned or froze to death in the icy waters, one of the worst disasters of its kind. Since then, the world has gone Titanic mad with books, movies, video games, a musical, multiple museums, a ton of merchandise, and even plans to build a working life-size replica of the ship. And that is what I want to talk about. This morbid love affair humanity has had with the Titanic for over 100 years. And while I understand some of it, I have certainly never approved of it. Am I the only one who remembers that the sinking of the Titanic was a bad thing? 1,500 people died, terrified as the ship sunk beneath them, screaming for help as they froze to death in the icy waters. And there were acts of cruelty. Third and second class passengers couldn't get to the lifeboats because they were literally locked below decks by the crew. This was a horrible thing that happened to a lot of people, and I'm not saying we shouldn't commemorate it, but I think the world shouldn't be all agog about it either. Every few years another film is made about it. And incidentally, did you know that the first Titanic film was made 28 days after it sank? It starred and was co-written by Dorothy Gibson, who actually was one of the survivors. Can you believe that? This woman sees the Titanic goes down, hears the screams of the survivors begging for help as they slowly died, and in less than 30 days she is capitalizing on that by making a movie about it and starring herself. It's got to be one of the most shameless cash grabs I've ever heard of. In 2001, a couple went down in a submersible to the wreck of the ship and got married there. They actually found something romantic about that place, enough for the most important special day of their lives. If you're waiting to be on somewhere special, why not don some radiation suits and hold it at Chernobyl? You know, Chernobyl actually seems more romantic to me than the wreck of the Titanic, because only 31 people died there. And then there's the musical. An all-singing, all-dancing version of one of the greatest tragedies in history? I mean, you wouldn't do a musical about Pompeii, would you?
Up, Pompeii, up, Pompeii. I never seem to get it all.
That doesn't count! And years ago, I saw a catalogue advertisement for a battery-powered model of the Titanic, complete with inflatable iceberg. I mean, what's next? The 9/11 playset? And I'm not the only one who has these feelings. Comedian Russell Howard finds this love affair a little outrageous as well.
So what's been going on? Did anyone else see all those people celebrating the Titanic? setting sail to the site of the sinking, the cruise to remember the Titanic.
They're marking the 100th anniversary of the Titanic by sailing a boat. How insensitive is that? People drowned. Let's go cruising! It doesn't stop there. Apparently, they're serving a pudding on board called the iceberg. That's the thing that killed them. You wouldn't serve JFK's family a rifle trifle.
Speaking of which, renowned chef Heston Blumenthal created a Titanic-themed dining room for his TV miniseries, where, for dessert, he actually served an edible iceberg. En flambe!
My goodness! Oh, that is amazing!
Amazing! What are we eating? Absolutely gobsmacked, that is.
Oh God. It's made in the image of something that brought death to all those people, and they are literally eating it up.
I'm afraid I've done something terrible.
Do it.
If people are willing to make this, why not an edible Auschwitz? Now that would be en flambe. You know, for another one of his feasts, Heston Blumenthal made a pudding in the form of an edible graveyard, and yet I find that one less morbid than his iceberg. So, if it isn't abundantly clear by now that I have a chip on my shoulder, let me reiterate that I am morally outraged that so many people can have such affection for something so horrendous. But in my infallible honesty, I admit there is more to my indignation than I've already stated. Part of my outrage is this. Everyone has heard of the Titanic. No one has heard of the Great Eastern. The SS Great Eastern was a passenger ship designed and built by my childhood hero Isambard Kingdom Brunel in 1858. With a length of almost 700 feet, she was the largest ship ever built. And it has always bothered me that the Great Eastern seems to have sunk into obscurity, while the Titanic continues to float on perpetual popularity, particularly when, in some ways, the Great Eastern was superior to the Titanic. Now, the Titanic at the time was the biggest ship ever built, bigger than the Great Eastern. But the Great Eastern was a much more ambitious project for the time. How much bigger was the Titanic than its nearest rival? Well, the previous record holder for world's biggest ship was the RMS Mauretania with a length of 790 feet. The Titanic broke that record with a length of just over 882 feet. So the Titanic beat the Mauretania by almost 100 feet. It was bigger than its nearest rival by about 1/8. Now, the Great Eastern was just short of being 700 feet long, which seems small compared to the other two ships I've mentioned. But let me tell you that at the time, the biggest ship ever built was the RMS Ontario with a mere 350 feet. So you see, the Titanic broke the record, but only by a fraction compared to its nearest rival. The Great Eastern, on the other hand, was almost twice the length of any other ship before it. So you see, it was a much bigger leap in terms of engineering, and a much more ambitious project, and that's saying a lot considering the relative level of development at the time. Secondly, the Great Eastern may have been inferior in size and technology, but it was clearly superior in engineering. In the Titanic's design, a great deal of safety was sacrificed for luxury, and not just in the number of lifeboats. In 1862, the Great Eastern struck an uncharted rock, leaving it with a giant gash in its side, a hole more than 60 times worse than the damage that sunk the Titanic. Well, not only did the Great Eastern not sink, not only did it make it back to port under its own power, but the passengers didn't even know it had happened. And thirdly, it lasted longer than its maiden voyage. But despite all that, it's not the Great Eastern that everyone's heard of, or has multiple museums, or dozens of movies and documentaries. Why? Because, like Jimi Hendrix said, once you're dead, you're made for life. And that's just what happened, isn't it? The Titanic died, and that is what made it famous. Just like Jimi Hendrix himself, along with Elvis Presley and Michael Jackson, it would seem that the Titanic's great failure has brought more commercial success than if it had had a perfectly good career. And in conclusion, let me just add that it is a myth that the Titanic sinking was the worst disaster of its kind. In 1865, the riverboat Sultana exploded and more than 800 people died. But no one's made a major movie about that, have they? Well, that's my show. Tune in next time for more Opinions from the Armchair.